Welcome to Biomed Explorer. In this video, I'd like to talk about an organ so small it could sit on your fingertip, yet it quietly runs the entire chemical command center of your body, the pituitary gland. I'll cover what this gland actually is, how it takes silent orders from a part of your brain most people have never heard of, how it sends those orders out to organs scattered across your entire body, the constant feedback loop that keeps this whole system from spiraling out of control, what happens when something goes wrong, and the daily habits quietly shaping how well this gland does its job without you ever realizing it. So, let's get started. What is the pituitary gland? Most people, if they've heard of the pituitary gland at all, think of it as some vague hormone thing buried somewhere in the head. That's technically true, but it's also a massive understatement of what's actually happening. Very few people realize this single pea-sized structure is quietly directing nearly every other hormone-producing gland in your entire body, all day, every day. So where exactly is it, and what does it look like? The pituitary gland sits just beneath your brain, cradled inside a small bony pocket at the base of your skull. Suspended just above it, connected by a thin stalk, is a brain region called the hypothalamus, and this connection matters more than almost anything else in this story. Together, the hypothalamus and pituitary function like a command center and its dispatcher, one deciding what needs to happen, the other broadcasting the order. The gland itself is really two separate structures fused together, an anterior lobe at the front and a posterior lobe at the back. Individually, each lobe operates completely differently, one manufacturing its own hormones from scratch, the others simply releasing hormones made somewhere else entirely. But together they form a single broadcasting station, quietly issuing chemical instructions that ripple outward to your thyroid, your adrenal glands, your reproductive organs, and beyond. The anterior pituitary, a gland built for manufacturing. Let's start with the anterior lobe, and here's something that surprises a lot of people. This isn't just a passive relay switch. It's an actual hormone factory, built from clusters of specialized cells, each one dedicated to producing one specific chemical messenger. The anterior pituitary manufactures 6 major hormones, and each one has its own target elsewhere in the body. Growth hormone tells your bones and tissues to grow and repair. Thyroid-stimulating hormone tells your thyroid gland how much metabolism-regulating hormone to release. Adrenocorticotropic hormone tells your adrenal glands how much cortisol to produce. Follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone direct the ovaries and testes. And prolactin signals the breast tissue to produce milk after childbirth. None of these cells fire off hormones on their own accord, though. Every single one waits for a signal descending from the hypothalamus above, a specific releasing hormone that acts like a key turning a lock, telling that particular cell cluster exactly when to release its cargo and how much to send, how an order from the brain becomes a hormone in your blood. Now let's talk about where this whole cascade actually begins, and it doesn't begin in the pituitary at all, it begins one level up, inside the hypothalamus itself. As the hypothalamus senses conditions changing throughout the body, low blood sugar, cold temperatures, low reproductive hormones, it manufactures tiny releasing hormones and sends them down through a private network of blood vessels running through that connecting stalk. This network is called the hypophyseal portal system, and it's remarkably efficient, delivering the hypothalamus's chemical instructions directly to the anterior pituitary without ever diluting them into general circulation first. Once those instructions arrive, the corresponding cluster of anterior pituitary cells responds by releasing its own hormone into the bloodstream, and that hormone travels outward until it reaches its target gland somewhere else in the body. That target gland then produces its own hormone in response: cortisol, thyroid hormone, estrogen, testosterone. And it's only at that final step that the actual physical effect happens: faster metabolism, more energy, restored fertility. And in a detail most people never think about, this entire chain, from brain signal to final hormone, unfolds continuously in short bursts every 1 to 3 hours, quietly cycling through activity and rest around the clock. The posterior pituitary, a storage tank rather than a factory, While the anterior lobe is busy manufacturing hormones, the posterior lobe works in an entirely different way. And here's something most people never picture correctly. The posterior pituitary doesn't actually make anything itself. Instead, two hormones, antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin, are manufactured further up inside the hypothalamus, then travel down along nerve fibers running through that same connecting stalk, arriving at the posterior pituitary purely for storage. When the body needs them, the posterior pituitary simply releases them directly into the bloodstream, functioning less like a factory and more like a warehouse sitting at the end of a very short supply chain. Antidiuretic hormone signals the kidneys to reabsorb more water whenever the body senses dehydration, while oxytocin triggers uterine contractions during childbirth and the milk ejection reflex during breastfeeding. Both are released the moment the hypothalamus decides they're needed, with the posterior pituitary acting purely as the final checkpoint before they reach the blood. The hidden dial that keeps this whole system from spiraling. Here's a detail that catches almost everyone off guard. The pituitary doesn't just send instructions out and forget about them. It's constantly listening for a response coming back through a quiet, self-correcting loop most people never even realize exists. As target glands like the thyroid or adrenal glands increase their own hormone output, that rising hormone level travels back through the blood and is detected by both the pituitary and the hypothalamus above it. Once levels climb high enough, this feedback tells the pituitary to ease off, reducing its own signaling hormone until levels settle back down again. It's a bit like a thermostat quietly adjusting itself, constantly comparing the current temperature against a target and correcting course before things swing too far in either direction. This negative feedback loop is exactly why hormone levels in a healthy body rarely spike wildly or crash without warning, and in rarer cases this feedback shortens even further, with certain pituitary hormones acting directly back on the hypothalamus itself, creating an even faster internal check within the system. When the system breaks down, given how many interconnected signals are involved in this system, it's no surprise that pituitary problems, while relatively uncommon, can have wide-reaching effects. Pituitary tumors, most often benign growths called adenomas, are the most frequent cause of trouble, and they tend to fall into two very different categories depending on what they do to hormone output. Some tumors overproduce a specific hormone. A growth hormone-secreting tumor causes acromegaly, a rare disorder in adults marked by gradually enlarging hands, feet, and facial features, along with fatigue, headaches, and sleep apnea. Because these changes creep in so slowly, acromegaly is often mistaken for normal aging, with an average diagnostic delay of 7 to 8 years. A prolactin-secreting tumor, meanwhile, can cause milk discharge from the breast, irregular periods, and infertility in women, and impotence in men, all from a single overactive cell cluster quietly flooding the blood with one hormone. Other tumors do the opposite, physically pressing on surrounding pituitary tissue and shutting hormone production down instead, which can bring on fatigue, sexual dysfunction, and changes in body composition or appearance. And in a small number of cases, sudden bleeding or blood loss can damage the gland directly, occasionally cutting off its hormone output almost entirely, a stark reminder of just how much depends on this one small structure functioning correctly. Daily habits quietly shaping how well this gland performs. Even without a tumor or an injury, a handful of everyday habits shape how smoothly this system runs. Sleep is one of the most influential factors of all, since growth hormone is released almost exclusively during deep slow-wave sleep, meaning fragmented or shallow sleep quietly interrupts the body's nightly repair process night after night without you ever noticing the difference the next morning. Chronic stress works against the system in a similar hidden way. Prolonged stress and elevated cortisol suppress growth hormone secretion by disrupting slow-wave sleep, quietly trading long-term repair for short-term alertness. And because the stress hormone pathway and the sleep hormone pathway both run straight through this same small gland, one disrupted habit rarely stays isolated. It tends to nudge the entire cascade slightly out of rhythm, often for years before anyone notices anything is different at all. The three main jobs of the pituitary gland. So now that we've covered all of the parts, let's bring it together. Between its two lobes and its constant conversation with the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland performs three main jobs every single day. The first job belongs to the anterior lobe alone, manufacturing and releasing a specific set of hormones on command, each one directed at a completely different target gland elsewhere in the body. The second job belongs to the posterior lobe, storing and releasing two additional hormones manufactured elsewhere, holding them ready until the exact moment the body calls for them. The third job happens only when the hypothalamus, pituitary, and target glands work together, constantly listening to each other's signals and adjusting output in real time, so no single hormone ever drifts too far out of balance for too long. Wrapping it up, there you have it. The pituitary gland, a structure most people only think about when something goes wrong, quietly coordinating your entire hormonal system every single day. This pea-sized gland manufactures and stores the chemical messengers that regulate your growth, your metabolism, your stress response, and your reproduction, all while constantly listening for feedback to keep every signal in balance. The pituitary gland may be something you rarely think about beyond the occasional mention of hormones, but every hour, in short, quiet bursts, it's coordinating a chemical conversation running throughout your entire body, converting simple brain signals into a cascade so smooth you almost never notice it's happening at all. Thanks for watching, and Biomed Explorer uploads a new science video every day. Please subscribe and share.